Welcome to this special episode of Off to 7,000 Islands, and today we have some special news about travel regulations in the Philippines. The really nice thing, a few days ago the government announced that there will be open travel again for tourists in the Philippines, and we want to go into the details of who actually is allowed to come, what does it entail, and I have some tips and tricks how to go about it coming out of the tourism sector itself. Here what we made for experience over the last 2 years as we been running, or my wife been running a hotel, and how to go about it. So let's dive in. There's not all details out yet, it's still a bit vague, and you can find some details on some news websites which I actually haven't found the government announcing. So that's a bit of a tricky one. For example, what happened with unvaccinated people. So there's still some things to figure out, and I was trying to wait for a few days, but there's no new news. But on the 10th of February, the government said that there will be all vaccinated tourists who are coming from visa-free countries, which is most of Europe and North America and quite a few other countries as well, will be allowed to enter the country without quarantine. And that's really exciting. So before there was lots of quarantine and tourists were not allowed, and now tourists are allowed and they don't need to do quarantine. There is a website I put down below where you can see which countries are visa free, but I would also recommend you from your countries, ministries of foreign affairs have websites where they recommend certain things about countries and traveling to these countries. So check them out. I put you the German one and the British one, which I used before a lot, down below in the description as well, and they're really helpful, especially when you think about the regulations of coming back after your holiday. But now we solved this, so vaccinated people are definitely allowed back into the country without quarantine. You need to have a hotel reservation and a leaving flight as well, which is not that new actually, but it will really help you, I think, also to travel within the country. But there we come in a bit later. So fully vaccinated people means 2 vaccines, and if possible 3. So you need to have the 2 doses of vaccines and maybe the booster as well. What is also new, the Philippines are now recognizing the yellow certificate from the World Health Organization as proof, and there's some other ways of having proved your vaccine. You also need to provide a PCR test not older than 48 hours before your flight. So that means your departure in your country, so 48 hours. So these are the rules, and there are exceptions to these rules. And we are just talking about tourists, not about Filipinos returning home and stuff, so they have also exceptions. But there is exceptions apparently. For example, the embassy in the US from the Philippines says you should contact them for exceptions, which probably means that you should really contact your embassy from your country, the embassy from the Philippines in your country, to really check what exceptions there are. They usually don't recognize a survived and recovered infection of corona, which is in many European countries, I know that's a thing, but that's not a thing here. So only vaccine counts usually. If you want an exception, you need to talk with the embassy in your country. That's probably the safest way. But from experience, it's not very fast. So you might want to hold off with that. So we covered what are the basic regulations and what you can do. There's some other difficulties. There's only a limited number of flights coming into the Philippines, which this regulation will not be lifted, at least not as I can find out. So flights might be still quite a few which you can actually find. But there's usually cheap offers, at least from Europe, with some of the airlines you can find. We probably would not recommend to fly over China or having a stop over China, as they're still super strict, but other Asian countries are losing their regulations as well and are not locking down everything like anymore. So that's quite good, but you really should check where you stop over before you come to the Philippines, because like as we have seen, actually Hong Kong, they cancelled all the flights which were coming in as they had the last corona wave. So there's some tricky bits you need to watch out when you fly. So when you come to the Philippines, what are some of the tricky bits you might encounter here? And that's still a bit vague. So the official announcement says, and it says on the Philippine embassy website from the US and Germany as well, that there will be no travel restrictions if you to travel within the country for those tourists who are coming on the free visa entry. And that is probably kind of true, but you might, and in domestic flights are still working and you can go on them, and that's probably the best way to go about. But you probably need something is called the S-Pass, at least when you want to travel to Mindoro, where I live and we have our hotel. And that S-Pass is on the website, and you need to apply for it, and you need to say where you're staying and where you're coming and all this kind of stuff, and then you get a little QR code, which you can show then at the airport and all the kind of stuff where you get checked. Often they want to see that you have a reservation. It's usually not a problem, but they want to see that you have a reservation for the hotel, and then they often contact the hotel as well, as we have experienced, if you really book there. So sometimes when you apply for this, you could already tell the hotel, oh, we just have applied for it, and then the hotel can be ready, because if you do that late at night, that will take longer if the hotel needs to respond and all this kind of stuff, you know. So that's some things you need to look out for. There is an alert system with different stages from 1 to 5, where there's different regulations and how to travel and what else. And there is rumor that will be dropped. At least all country will be going back to alert level 2 on the 15th of February. But they update that every 2 weeks, so on the 15th of February is the next time they will update that, and there you will see more details where your hotel, for example, is, or where you want to stay at or travel, which alert level they have. I put also a link down below where you can see that more in detail. But you need to follow that quite closely as well, because if they go over level 3, that means you can't really travel there anymore. And also there's some if you want an exception because you're not vaccinated, there could be bans on on airlines and things where you can't go on if you're not vaccinated. And that's, the government can decide that, but also of course the private companies. So that's some things to look out for. I put some useful links down below where you can follow all this, but in general it's pretty simple for foreigners to travel. They usually get quite easy this kind of S-Pass compared to Filipinos, we have noticed at least. So you can travel and domestic flights are working and this kind of stuff, and buses of course, and if you want to travel by car, you probably can do that as well. Just have all the documents before you go somewhere, because otherwise it takes really long time to explain things and to get things. And so get everything ready when you can get it ready, and check all the deadlines, how early you can do actually something. So that's quite important. The other thing is, if you travel here and you're concerned about corona, so I put a link down below how you can watch the case numbers and all this kind of stuff. One thing as a tourist you need to keep in mind that you probably come only in contact with vaccinated people. So in the tourism sector, most people are vaccinated who work. In the transport business, most people are vaccinated and even have their boosters. So there's not much of a worry. And I would say, but that's personal opinion, most of the people here had corona, and so you're kind of very safe if you come here and you travel from hotel to hotel, for example. So you don't really need to think too much about it. The other thing is, when you go back, of course you need to observe your country's regulation. And I know in Germany, when you come back, you actually need to go into quarantine, which hopefully will be dropped as well, but in other countries that might be as well. So you need to keep that in mind, that it is maybe not as quickly changing as here in the Philippines, what your country does. So that's one big thing as well. If you need a PCR test, there are PCR tests available, especially in Manila. Best is maybe to contact your hotel. Your hotel can find that out, and often it takes at the moment a very long time to get your results, which can be a problem for your flight. So that's one of the things, like if you need to have only 24 hours before your flight a PCR test to go back, then it might be difficult to get that. But what I have seen in Cebu is, for example, they offer before the flight in the airport this kind of services. Be prepared, that might cost a bit, like probably between $50 and $100 at least. So you need to watch out for that, but it is possible to get those things, and if you talk with your hotel, they usually can find out where to go and what to do. And if you want to find it out before, even better. So if you know exactly how to set an appointment and those kind of things, especially when you do individual travel. Yeah, that's probably about it. So, one thing. Most of the towns where you go and counties, they don't have their own website. So on the official website, you can find out like the alert level your town is in and all this kind of stuff from the federal government. But in your town yourself, to stay up to date, often they have a Facebook page. So, and most of the people are on Facebook, or they have an old account, so you can recover that. And then you just put in, search for your town, and then public announcements often, or health announcements even, something like this, or official public announcements and your town name. And they often have those, and if you will better stay up to date with the news from your town itself. That's a really big thing. So it works really well, it goes very fast, and you can find usually a lot of information on those pages. And actually the last tip I have is wait until the 10th of February, because it was cancelled before and you don't want to get cancelled. So I would wait until the 10th of February to book anything to the Philippines. And have a look. Like when you pre-book things, so hotels here had really tough time. So tourism had a really tough time here. 2 years of no foreign tourists, which bring most of the money. So if you have a travel insurance and you can't then travel, the best thing is to solve it over the travel insurance and not ask for the hotels to give everything back what you might be already like a down payment or something, because the hotels be not running full, they are running really badly and everything. And if you have an insurance, then try to solve it over that insurance and not over the hotel, because you're just taking money away from them. and they don't have customers, and also respect their policies of maybe not can offer any like back payment of your deposit or something like this, because actually like they have so little at the moment. And that's not just because I live from it, but I actually know from lots of people here who are struggling, who have hotels who depend a lot on foreign visitors, who then struggle a lot. So keep that in mind when you book something, and read their policies, and then don't like try to haggle your money back. If they have policies saying you can't get your deposit back no matter what, even if you get ill, then please respect that as well, because that's just, they're trying to survive as well. That's maybe some warning to be cautious, but to not be like afraid of it. No, I mean, usually hotels are really cheap in the Philippines, so don't get like all crazy and worried about like 20 euros and stuff like this. So that is really the last one. So now I've been rambling a lot, and I hope you get some information for it. And there's lots of information down in the description. If you enjoyed that, if you found it helpful, please give it a like so more people will see it. If you want to find out more about me and my wife, who are running a hotel here in the Philippines as well, you can find some links down below in the description as well. So thank you for watching, and hopefully see you in the next one.